She wasn't supposed to see him. Hidden beneath the silver light of the moon, the Alpha King, the man every warrior feared, was on his knees beside the lifeless body of a white wolf. His hands trembled. His face was buried in the wolf's blood-stained fur. And through broken breaths, he cried, not as a king, not as an alpha, but as a man who had just lost the one soul that had never abandoned him. Elena froze behind the trees. One step forward, and he would know she had witnessed the one thing no one in the kingdom believed possible. The Alpha King could break. She could have exposed him. She could have used his secret to earn wealth, power, or a place inside the royal court. She quietly laid a handful of white moon lilies beside the fallen wolf, then disappeared without saying a single word. She believed she would never see him again. She was wrong. Only 3 days later, she rescued a dying white wolf from the hands of brutal slave traders. Clinging to that wounded animal was a terrified little boy who couldn't even remember his own name. The wolf carried the same scar, the same silver eyes, the same royal collar that had been buried with the king's dead companion. Wow. The wolf the entire kingdom had mourned was alive. And the moment the Alpha King saw it again, an ancient secret buried beneath years of grief began to awaken. Because the greatest danger wasn't that Elena had discovered the king's tears. It was that the woman who protected his broken heart had always been the moon's chosen mate. The forest always seemed to wake before the kingdom did. Long before the villages opened their doors, before smoke curled from chimneys, before merchants argued over prices in crowded markets, the ancient woods already breathed with quiet life. A thin blanket of silver mist drifted between towering pine trees, wrapping every branch in silence. Dew clung to emerald leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a lone bird welcomed the rising sun with a soft, uncertain song. Along a narrow woodland path walked a young healer named Elena. A woven basket rested comfortably over one arm, already filled with fresh herbs gathered before sunrise. Lavender, moonleaf, and healing moss released their gentle scents into the cool morning air. She had followed this trail almost every day for years. She knew every twisted oak, every moss-covered stone, every stream hidden beneath the trees. The forest had become her home long before people ever had. She walked slowly, occasionally kneeling beside tiny wildflowers to gather one more healing root, smiling whenever curious rabbits peeked through bushes before disappearing again. For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Child cried. Not the playful cry of someone throwing a tantrum. Not the laughter of children chasing each other through fields. This was different. It was sharp, broken, terrified. Elena stopped walking. The sound echoed again. Then came another sound. A whip cracking through the morning air. Her fingers tightened around the basket. A few frightened birds burst into the sky all at once. The forest itself suddenly felt uneasy. Without thinking, Elena stepped off the familiar trail. The cries grew louder. Branches scraped against her cloak as she hurried through thick undergrowth. Another whip cracked. Another child screamed. Then angry voices followed. Move! You belong where I say you belong. You'll be sold before sunset. Elena finally reached the edge of the trees. What she saw stole the warmth from the morning. A large wooden wagon stood beside the old trade road. Iron cages had been bolted onto its sides. Men, women, even children, sat crowded together behind rusted bars. Heavy chains wrapped around their wrists and ankles. Their faces were pale from exhaustion. Some stared blankly at the ground. Others silently cried. No one fought anymore. They looked like people who had forgotten hope. Beside the wagon stood 4 armed slave traders. Their leader laughed while counting small bags of silver. One of the younger guards kicked a kneeling prisoner simply because he had moved too slowly. Then Elena noticed him. Little boy, perhaps 8 years old. Thin enough for every rib to show beneath his torn shirt. His dark hair covered frightened blue eyes that refused to leave the tiny white wolf curled against his chest. The pup barely moved. Its snowy fur was stained with dirt and dried blood. One ear had been torn. Its breathing came in painful little gasps. The boy wrapped both arms around the animal as though protecting the last beautiful thing left in his world. A trader grabbed the wolf by its hind leg. "Throw that useless beast away." The boy immediately shook his head. "No." His voice barely escaped his lips. "Please." The trader laughed. "It'll die before noon." The boy held the wolf even tighter. "It isn't alone." Those quiet words somehow carried farther than shouting ever could. The trader's smile vanished. He raised the whip again. Crack. The leather struck the boy's shoulder. He cried out in pain but never loosened his grip. Again. Crack. This time he bent forward, shielding the wolf with his own body. Elena felt something inside her twist. She had seen cruelty before. She had healed wounded travelers. She had buried children abandoned after harsh winters. But watching someone hurt a child for showing compassion, that was something she could never walk away from. She stepped from the trees. The traders immediately turned. One of them frowned. "Keep walking, healer." Another laughed. "This isn't your business." Elena looked only at the frightened prisoners. Then at the bleeding child. Then at the dying wolf. Finally she met the leader's eyes. "It became my business the moment you raised your hand against a child." The men exchanged amused glances. The leader stepped closer. "You know who we are." "I know exactly what you are." Silence settled over the road. Even the wind seemed to stop. The trader smirked. "You've got courage." "No," Elena answered softly. "I simply refuse to mistake fear for wisdom." The leader's expression hardened. "Leave." She didn't move. "I said leave." "Oh." She remained exactly where she stood. One of the horses pulling the wagon suddenly stomped its hoof nervously. Another tossed its head. Elena noticed their reins had been tied carelessly. Her eyes shifted almost invisibly toward the knots, then back to the traders. She smiled politely. "You really should learn to treat every living creature with kindness." The leader frowned. "What?" Before anyone understood her meaning, Elena pulled a small pouch from her basket. With one quick motion, she scattered dried pepper herbs into the air. The wind carried them directly toward the horses. Within seconds the startled animals reared violently. They screamed. The wagon lurched sideways. The traders shouted in confusion. "Grab them! The horses! They're running!" While every guard rushed toward the frightened animals, Elena ran. Not away. Toward the cages. She pulled a small knife from her belt. Years of cutting herbs had made her hands quick and steady. One chain. Then another. Then another. Iron locks clicked open. The first prisoner stared in disbelief. "Go!" Elena whispered. "Run!" Nobody moved. They had forgotten freedom. She repeated herself louder. "Run!" This time they understood. People stumbled from the cages. Some fell. Others helped strangers stand. Parents grabbed children. Old men supported injured women. Hope spread through terrified faces almost faster than fear. The orphan boy remained sitting exactly where he was, still holding the wolf. Elena knelt beside him. "We have to go." He looked at the animal. "It can't walk." "I know." She gently lifted the tiny white wolf into her arms. It was frighteningly light, almost weightless, as though life itself barely remained inside it. The boy stood immediately, without speaking. He reached for Elena's cloak. His tiny fingers trembled. She simply nodded. "You stay close." Behind them angry shouting erupted. "They're escaping. Stop them." A trader rushed forward with his sword drawn. Before he reached them, one of the freed prisoners threw a heavy wooden crate directly into his path. The man stumbled. Another prisoner tackled him. Chaos exploded across the road. Elena guided everyone toward the forest. The trees welcomed them like old friends. Branches hid them. Mist swallowed their footsteps. Within moments, half the prisoners had disappeared into the woods. The traders screamed in frustration. The leader turned toward the abandoned wagon. His eyes widened. No! Elena had quietly overturned every lantern before leaving. Oil slowly spread across dry wooden boards. She looked back only once. Then she tossed a burning torch. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then flames burst across the wagon. Orange fire climbed wooden wheels. Iron cages glowed red. Chains cracked in the heat. Smoke curled into the pale morning sky. The slave cart, the symbol of countless stolen lives, began burning before everyone's eyes. No one cheered. No one celebrated. The freed prisoners simply watched silently. Some cried. Some fell to their knees. Others held each other for the first time in years. Behind Elena, the little boy whispered something so quietly she almost didn't hear it. It won't hurt anyone anymore. She looked at the burning wagon. No, it won't. The white wolf suddenly whimpered weakly in her arms. She lowered her eyes. Beneath dried blood, something metallic caught the sunlight. Carefully brushing away matted fur, Elena uncovered a leather collar hidden beneath its neck. Stamped into the worn leather was an unfamiliar silver crest. A howling wolf beneath a royal crown. Beautiful. Important. She frowned slightly. What are you? The orphan shook his head. I found him in a cage. He knew nothing more. Elena wrapped the exhausted animal inside her cloak. Whatever the symbol meant, could wait. Saving its life came first. She led the child deeper into the forest. Neither of them noticed a pair of distant golden eyes watching silently from the highest ridge. Nor did they know that somewhere far beyond the trees, an alpha king had awakened that very morning with an unfamiliar ache in his heart, as though something he believed lost forever had just taken its first breath again. The Blackfong fortress stood like a mountain carved from midnight. Its towering stone walls overlooked endless forests, its iron gates never truly closed, and its watchtowers remained awake long after the kingdom had fallen asleep. Warriors trained from sunrise until darkness claimed the sky. The clang of steel echoed through the courtyards every day, reminding everyone that strength ruled this kingdom before kindness ever had. Every soldier feared its king. Every noble respected him. Every enemy prayed never to meet him. Alpha King Kaelin had earned that reputation long before he wore the crown. He had never lost a battle. Never broken a promise made to his people. Never allowed another territory to steal even a single piece of his land. To most of the kingdom, he seemed almost impossible to break. But there was one thing no victory had ever healed. One loss. One wound. One name he still carried inside his heart. Morning sunlight poured through the council chamber's enormous windows, but warmth never seemed to reach the room. Around the circular stone table sat the kingdom's oldest council members. Maps covered every surface. Letters from neighboring territories lay unopened. Arguments had already begun before the king even entered. The eastern border needs more soldiers. Our grain stores are lower than last winter. The Moonridge Pack is testing our patrol routes again. Kaelin listened without speaking. His silver eyes remained fixed on the large map before him. He answered only when necessary. Double the northern patrol. Send food to the western villages before snowfall. No retaliation unless they cross our border. Simple. Direct. The council admired his decisions because they rarely came from anger. But one elder leaned forward carefully. My king. Kaelin finally looked up. The memorial should be removed. Silence immediately settled across the chamber. Another elder nodded. It has been years. The kingdom needs to move forward. The people still whisper about your bonded wolf. Kaelin's expression never changed. What people whisper is not your concern. The memorial reminds everyone of weakness. It reminds me of loyalty. No one spoke after that. The meeting ended moments later. One by one the council members quietly left the chamber. Only General Rowan remained. He had fought beside Kaelin since they were boys. If anyone understood the king's silence, it was him. You still dream about him. Kaelin stood beside the window overlooking the forests below. Every night. General Rowan sighed softly. You saved thousands. I couldn't save one. Those few words carried years of regret. The general wanted to answer. Is it? He simply placed a hand on Kaelin's shoulder. Then quietly walked away. Some grief never accepted comfort. As evening settled across the kingdom, Elena arrived at the fortress carrying fresh medicine. The elderly royal healer greeted her warmly. You came sooner than expected. The herbs were ready. And your old knees refuse to heal if you keep climbing castle stairs. The old healer laughed. You sound exactly like your mother. Elena smiled sadly. I'll take that as a compliment. For the next several hours she worked quietly. She changed bandages, mixed healing tonics, checked recovering soldiers. One young guard thanked her after finally moving his injured arm without pain. Another shyly handed her a loaf of warm bread baked by the kitchen staff. Small acts of gratitude always meant more to Elena than coins. By the time she finished, night had already covered the fortress. The old healer frowned at the sky. You shouldn't walk home alone now. I've walked these woods my whole life. They're different after dark. She smiled gently. So am I. The old healer laughed despite himself. Very well. He handed her a small lantern. At least humor an old man. She accepted it with a grateful nod before leaving through the quieter eastern gate. The forest looked completely different beneath moonlight. Silver beams slipped through branches like flowing water. Owls called softly overhead. Every shadow seemed deeper than before. Elena followed the narrow woodland trail she had used since childhood. Halfway home, she heard footsteps, heavy, low. Not the hurried pace of hunters. Not the careful movement of wolves. Someone walked with purpose. Curiosity made her step behind an ancient oak tree. A tall figure appeared between the mist. Even beneath darkness, there was no mistaking him. Alpha King Kaelin. He wore no royal cloak. No polished armor. Only simple black clothing beneath a heavy traveling cape. No guards followed him. No servants. He walked entirely alone. Elena frowned. The king rarely traveled without protection. Why would he leave the fortress in the middle of the night? She should have continued home. Is it? Something told her to wait. Kaelin never looked around. His steps carried him toward the highest hill overlooking the valley. Elena stayed far enough away to avoid being heard. Eventually, the trees opened into a quiet clearing. Moonlight washed over weathered stone markers arranged in a circle. Wildflowers grew naturally between them. At the center stood a single wooden post. Hanging from it, a worn leather collar. Elena stopped breathing. The collar looked almost identical to the one hidden beneath the injured white wolf's fur. Except this one was empty. Kaelin slowly reached out. His fingers trembled. Not from cold, from memory. He carefully lifted the collar from the post, holding it against his chest. For a long time, he simply stood there. The strongest man in the kingdom. Unable to move. Unable to let go. Finally, he spoke. His voice barely carried across the clearing. I looked everywhere. Silence answered. I should have found you. A breeze stirred the grass. I told you I'd never leave you. His shoulders slowly lowered. I broke that promise. Elena felt her chest tighten. This wasn't a king speaking. This was simply a man mourning someone he loved. Then she saw it. A single tear rolled down Kaelin's face. Another followed. He quickly wiped them away as though ashamed. Yet more came. Years of grief escaped without permission. I won every battle after that day. His voice cracked. And none of them mattered. He knelt before the memorial. His forehead rested against the old wooden marker. I miss you. The words were so quiet. yet somehow louder than anything Elena had ever heard. No soldier, no servant, no council member would ever believe what she was witnessing. The Alpha King, crying completely alone, not because he feared death, not because he feared enemies, but because he still loved the wolf who had once saved his life. Elena lowered her eyes. This wasn't meant for anyone else. She slowly stepped backward. One careful step, then another. A branch snapped beneath her foot. Kalen's head lifted instantly. His entire body changed. The grieving man vanished. The Alpha King returned. "Who's there?" His voice cut through the clearing like a blade. Elena held her breath behind the trees. Kalen's instincts sharpened immediately. He searched the darkness. His hand rested on the sword at his side. But after several moments, the forest answered only with silence. Finally, he looked once more at the memorial, then quietly placed the collar back onto the wooden post. Without another word, he disappeared into the trees. Elena remained hidden until his footsteps completely faded. Only then did she slowly walk into the clearing. The memorial stood peacefully beneath the moon. She knelt where Kalen had knelt only moments earlier. Fresh tears still glistened on the grass where they had fallen. She looked toward the empty forest. "So that's the burden you carry." Her voice was barely a whisper. She reached into her basket. Inside lay several fresh white moon lilies she had gathered that morning. They were flowers often placed beside graves. Not because they represented death, but because they symbolized love that remained even after loss. Without speaking another word, she gently laid the flowers beneath the old collar. She expected nothing in return. No reward, no thanks, no recognition. Some grief deserved witnesses. Other grief deserved protection. She chose the second. As she walked away beneath the stars, she made herself one quiet promise. No one, not the council, not the servants, not even the old healer, would ever hear what she had seen tonight. Some secrets protected power. Others protected hearts. As one protected both. The following morning, Kalen returned to the memorial before sunrise. It had become part of his routine. He expected nothing different. The same wind, the same silence, the same loneliness. Does it? He stopped. White moon lilies rested neatly beneath the weathered collar, fresh, untouched by frost. His heartbeat slowed. Someone had been here. Someone had seen. His eyes searched the clearing. There were no footprints. No scent remained after the night's rain. Only the flowers. Kalen slowly picked one up. His fingers traced its delicate petals. Whoever had left them hadn't mocked him, hadn't spread rumors, hadn't disturbed the memorial. They had simply shown kindness. For the first time in many years, the emptiness on that lonely hill felt just a little less lonely. Far away, deep within the forest, the injured white wolf suddenly lifted its head from Elena's cottage. Its ears twitched. Its pale blue eyes turned toward the distant fortress, as if it had heard a voice calling across years of separation. And somewhere inside Kalen, a feeling he had buried with the past quietly stirred once again. Morning arrived quietly at Elena's woodland cottage. Golden sunlight slipped through the branches above, painting soft patterns across the little stone house hidden deep within the forest. Smoke curled gently from the chimney while birds hopped across the wooden fence, fearless in the peaceful silence that surrounded the place. It was a home built for healing. Bundles of lavender and rosemary hung beneath the roof to dry. Clay pots filled with herbs rested beside every window, their sweet fragrance mixing with the cool scent of pine drifting through the open door. Inside, everything felt warm, almost untouched by the cruelty that existed beyond the forest. Yet the tiny white wolf lying beside the fireplace carried reminders of that cruelty with every breath. Its body was still painfully thin. Fresh bandages wrapped around its injured shoulder. One ear remained torn where rough hands had dragged it through the slave cart. But unlike the frightened creature Elena had rescued only days before, Its eyes were finally open, bright silver blue, intelligent, watching everything. Elena knelt beside it with a bowl of warm broth mixed with healing herbs. "Let's try again." She smiled softly. "You've been stubborn enough." The wolf looked at the bowl, then deliberately turned its head away. Elena sighed. "I expected that." The little orphan boy, who still hadn't spoken more than a few words since the rescue, sat quietly near the window carving tiny wooden animals with a dull knife. Without looking up, he whispered, "It won't eat unless you feed it." Elena blinked. "You noticed?" He nodded. "It waits." She smiled gently. "So do frightened children." The boy finally looked at her. For the first time, there wasn't fear in his eyes, only quiet curiosity. Elena dipped her fingers into the warm broth. Very carefully, she held them near the wolf's mouth. The animal sniffed once, then slowly licked the broth from her fingertips. Another taste followed, then another. Within moments it began drinking from the bowl itself. The boy smiled. It was the first real smile Elena had seen since meeting him. But unmistakably real. "There you are," she whispered. "I knew you hadn't given up." The wolf looked directly into her eyes. For one strange moment, it almost seemed to understand every word. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm. Every sunrise brought another small improvement. The wolf could stand for a few moments before its injured leg trembled. Its breathing became stronger. Its dull fur slowly regained its snowy white color beneath Elena's careful washing. The orphan helped wherever he could. He gathered fresh water from the stream, collected firewood, fed the chickens. Whenever Elena worked outside, the boy remained beside the wolf, reading aloud from worn storybooks she had collected over the years. One afternoon he opened an old book filled with fairy tales. His quiet voice filled the cottage, and the white wolf guarded the kingdom even after everyone believed it was gone. He suddenly stopped reading. The wolf lifted its head. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Elena noticed the silence. "What happened?" The boy frowned. "I've never read this book before." "You haven't? Then." He slowly looked back at the page. "How did I know what came next?" Elena walked closer. The page he pointed toward wasn't even open. The words he had spoken weren't written there at all. A chill ran gently across her skin. The wolf continued staring at the child. Not with fear. Not with curiosity. With recognition. As though it already knew him. Far beyond the forest, inside Blackfang Fortress, Alpha King Kalan found himself distracted in ways he couldn't explain. General Rowan noticed immediately. "You've looked out that window 5 times. Kalan remained silent, waiting for someone. "No." "Then what?" Kalan finally answered. "My wolf is restless." General Rowan frowned. "But..." He stopped himself. Everyone believed the king's bonded wolf had died years ago. Even mentioning it felt dangerous. Kalan looked toward the endless forest stretching beyond the castle walls. "It keeps pulling me west. There are no enemy camps there. I know. No villages requesting aid. I know. No reports of danger. I know." General Rowan folded his arms. "Then what do you think is there?" Kalan stared at the distant trees. "I don't know." That was the part that disturbed him most. For several days an unfamiliar instinct had quietly tugged at him. Not urgency. Not fear. Something gentler. Like hearing someone whisper his name from far away. His wolf. The part of him every alpha carried within. Refused to settle. Later that afternoon, Kalan rode alone along the western patrol road. His massive black stallion followed familiar routes without command. Everything remained peaceful. Border markers stood untouched. The villages flourished. Children played beside streams. Nothing appeared unusual. And suddenly, the horse stopped. Without warning, it turned its head sharply toward the forest. Its ears stood upright. It refused to continue. Kaelin gently touched its neck. What is it? The stallion snorted softly. Instead of following the road, it stepped toward the trees. Again and again, as though another path called to it. Kaelin frowned. You've never ignored my orders before. The horse answered by pulling harder toward the woodland. Finally, Kaelin gave in. Very well. They left the road behind. Branches brushed against his shoulders as they entered unfamiliar parts of the forest. The deeper they traveled, the stronger the strange feeling became. His heartbeat quickened, not from danger, from recognition. Something was close. Back at the cottage, Elena was changing the wolf's bandages when it suddenly froze. Its ears lifted. Its breathing changed. The calm animal that had slept peacefully only moments earlier slowly stood despite its injured leg. The orphan looked toward the door. What is it? The wolf didn't answer. Is it? It walked outside. Every movement carried surprising determination. Elena followed immediately. The animal stared into the forest, listening, waiting. The sound arrived. Horse hooves, approaching slowly. A moment later a rider appeared between the trees. Black cloak, silver eyes, broad shoulders. Alpha King Kaelin. Elena's surprise lasted only a heartbeat. She quickly stepped forward. My king. Kaelin dismounted. One of his soldiers lay unconscious across the horse behind him. The young warrior's arm was badly injured. I was told a healer lived nearby. Elena nodded. You found her. Without another question she opened the cottage door. Bring him inside. Kaelin carefully carried the injured soldier across the threshold. As he lowered the young man onto the bed, he felt it. Presence. Fully. He turned around. The white wolf stood only a few feet away. Neither moved. Time itself seemed to stop. Kaelin stared. The wolf stared back. The scar above its left eye. Exactly where he remembered. The faint silver markings beneath its neck. Hidden beneath fresh bandages. His breathing became uneven. No, he whispered. It can't be. Elena looked between them. Neither seemed aware of anything else. The wolf took one careful step forward. Another. Its injured leg trembled. Continued. Kaelin slowly lowered himself onto one knee. His hand shook as he reached forward. If this is another dream. His voice broke. Don't wake me. The wolf stopped inches away. Its nose gently touched his fingertips. A familiar warmth rushed through Kaelin's chest. Years disappeared. Battles disappeared. Grief disappeared. Only one memory remained. A snow-covered battlefield. A loyal white wolf standing beside him. Protecting him. Choosing him. His eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. The wolf slowly leaned forward. Very gently. It pressed its forehead against his palm. Exactly as it had done 100 times before. Kaelin closed his eyes. I found you. For a single beautiful heartbeat. Everything felt whole again. And suddenly, the wolf's legs gave way. Its body collapsed from exhaustion. Kaelin caught it before it struck the floor. Panic immediately replaced relief. Elena! She was already kneeling beside them. It pushed itself too hard. Help it! I am. Kaelin refused to move. His hands remained carefully beneath the wolf's head. The fear in his face surprised even Elena. This wasn't the fearless Alpha King spoken about throughout the kingdom. This was simply a man terrified of losing someone twice. She gently examined the wolf. Its wounds haven't reopened. Kaelin looked at her desperately. Then why? It spent too much strength trying to reach you. Silence filled the cottage. The words settled heavily between them. To reach him. The orphan quietly stepped beside Elena. He waited. Kaelin looked at the boy. What? He waited for you. No one knew how the child understood. Somehow, everyone believed him. Hours later, the wolf slept peacefully again beside the fire. Kaelin remained seated nearby. He hadn't left. He simply watched, almost afraid the animal would disappear if he looked away. Finally, he spoke without lifting his eyes. I buried an empty grave. Elena quietly arranged fresh herbs. Sometimes hope survives longer than certainty. He looked toward her. You saved his life. I only gave him a chance. Kalen slowly reached down and brushed his fingers through the wolf's soft white fur. I searched every valley, every mountain, every battlefield. His voice became quieter. I stopped searching only after everyone convinced me there was nothing left to find. Elena didn't answer. Some grief didn't need advice. It only needed someone willing to sit beside it. The afternoon wind carried fallen leaves across the forest floor. Inside the cottage, something invisible had begun changing. Neither Elena nor Kalen recognized it yet. But somewhere beneath silence, beneath gratitude, beneath shared sorrow, an ancient-made bond had stirred for the very first time. Neither heart understood it, not yet, but destiny had finally brought them into the same room. And before either of them realized what that truly meant, the peaceful little cottage would soon become the center of a secret powerful enough to shake the entire kingdom. The rain arrived before dawn. Not the wild kind that shook rooftops or flooded rivers, but a slow, gentle rain that settled over the forest like a whispered blessing. Tiny drops clung to every pine needle, and the woodland around Elena's cottage seemed quieter than usual, as though even the birds respected the peace that had finally found the little home. Inside, a fire crackled softly. The injured soldier Kalen had brought the previous day still slept peacefully beneath thick blankets. The orphan boy sat near the window, carefully carving another small wooden wolf, while the great white wolf rested comfortably on a woven rug before the fireplace. Its breathing was stronger now. Its eyes no longer carried the empty look of an animal waiting to die. They watched every movement Elena made. She smiled as she replaced the wolf's bandages. You've decided to stay with us a little longer. The wolf answered by gently nudging her hand. The little boy laughed quietly. I think he likes you. Elena smiled. I hope he likes eating even more. The wolf looked toward the bowl she offered. This time, it didn't hesitate. Finished every drop. The boy clapped once, unable to hide his excitement. He's getting better. He is. But healing takes patience. She looked toward the sleeping soldier. People and wolves both forget that. Far above the forest, Kalen stood alone upon the eastern castle wall. The morning rain dampened his dark hair, yet he never noticed. His thoughts remained somewhere deep inside the forest. General Rowan eventually climbed the stone steps beside him. You've inspected the western border 3 days in a row. Kalen remained silent. The soldiers are beginning to notice. They can notice. The council already has. Kalen finally turned. And what conclusion have they reached? Rowan sighed. They believe you're hiding something. Kalen almost smiled. They're correct. Rowan raised an eyebrow. You actually admitted it. I admitted nothing. The king looked toward the forest once more. There are simply some truths that don't belong to politicians. General Rowan followed his gaze. Does it have something to do with the healer? Kalen didn't answer. His silence became the answer instead. That afternoon, Kalen returned to Elena's cottage carrying 2 leather satchels. When he knocked, Elena opened the door with mild surprise. My king. I brought supplies. She glanced toward the heavy bags. You didn't have to. I know. He stepped inside anyway. The orphan immediately stood. The white wolf lifted its head. Like before, it didn't growl. Instead, its tail moved once across the wooden floor. Almost shyly, Kalen noticed. His expression softened. I've missed that. The wolf slowly walked toward him, still limping slightly, but no longer afraid. Kalen crouched carefully. His large hand rested against the wolf's neck. You always hated staying still. The wolf closed its eyes beneath his touch. Elena quietly watched the moment unfold. There was something deeply beautiful about it. This enormous warrior, whom the entire kingdom feared, spoke to the wolf with a tenderness usually reserved for frightened children. After checking on the injured soldier together, Elena began sorting herbs across the kitchen table. Kaylin stood nearby watching her work. "You never rush." She smiled faintly. "Medicine doesn't listen to impatient people. And people, they usually don't either." That earned the smallest smile from the king. Perhaps the first genuine smile Elena had ever seen on his face. It transformed him. Only slightly, but enough to remind her that beneath the title, there was still simply a man. As she reached for another bundle of herbs, Kaylin noticed several white moon lilies hanging upside down to dry from the ceiling. He froze. Exactly the same flowers, the same delicate petals, the same scent. His heartbeat slowed. He looked toward Elena. "You grow these?" "I do. They're unusual. My mother loved them." Kaylin hesitated, then quietly asked, "Did you happen to visit the old Memorial Hill several nights ago?" Elena stopped working. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She could have lied. It would have been easier. "Is it?" She slowly nodded. "I did." Kaylin's expression became unreadable. "So, you saw." She lowered her eyes respectfully. "I wasn't meant to." Silence filled the cottage. The fire crackled softly behind them. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Finally, Kaylin asked the question that had haunted him since finding the flowers. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Elena looked at him with quiet surprise. "Tell them what?" "That their alpha king cries over a dead wolf." She held his gaze. "Because that isn't the story I saw." His brow furrowed. "What story did you see?" She answered without hesitation. "I saw someone who loved deeply enough to grieve honestly." Kaylin looked away. No one, not even his closest warriors, had ever spoken to him like that. He had expected pity, or embarrassment, perhaps judgment. "Is it?" She had seen humanity. "You weren't weak." She continued softly. "You were loyal." His throat tightened. "You don't understand." "No," she admitted. "I don't understand your pain." She gently placed another herb into a drying basket. "But I do understand loss." The room fell silent again. The orphan looked between them but wisely remained quiet. The rain slowly faded. Sunlight began pushing through the clouds. Kaylin's voice became almost a whisper. "I thought if anyone ever saw me there, they would fear me less." Elena shook her head. "I don't fear you because you cried." She smiled gently. "I fear people who never do." For several long moments, Kaylin couldn't answer. Those simple words reached places inside him that years of victories never had. From that day forward, his visits became more frequent. Never announced, never explained. Sometimes he arrived carrying medical supplies from the royal stores. Sometimes books rescued from forgotten library shelves. He appeared with nothing more than fresh bread still warm from the castle ovens. The orphan looked up in surprise. "For us?" Kaylin nodded awkwardly. "The baker made too much." Elena raised an eyebrow. "The royal kitchen accidentally baked 4 extra loaves." Kaylin looked completely serious. "So they claimed." The little boy giggled. Elena couldn't help smiling. It was the first time she'd ever seen the Alpha King attempt an excuse. And it was a terrible one. Days turned into weeks. The injured soldier returned to the fortress completely healed. Yet Kaylin kept finding reasons to visit. One afternoon he repaired the broken fence surrounding Elena's herb garden. Another day he quietly carried heavy water buckets from the nearby stream before she could stop him. "You don't have to do that." "I know. You're the king." "I'm aware." She laughed softly. "So stubborn." He looked at her. "I've been called worse." The conversation ended there. Comfortably. Neither of them felt the need to fill every silence. Sometimes, They simply worked side by side while birds sang overhead. Some bonds grew through grand declarations. Others began in peaceful silence. Late one evening, Elena found Kaelin sitting outside beneath the old oak tree overlooking the valley. The white wolf slept beside him. She quietly placed 2 cups of warm herbal tea on the wooden bench. I wasn't sure kings drank healers' tea. I wasn't sure healers shared it. She sat beside him. For several minutes, neither spoke. The sky slowly filled with stars. The orphan chased fireflies nearby, laughing as the glowing insects escaped his tiny hands. Kaelin watched him carefully. He's smiling now. He wasn't when I found him. You've changed that. Elena gently shook her head. He changed himself. I only stayed long enough for him to remember how. Kaelin continued watching the child. I don't know his name. He doesn't remember it. The king's expression darkened. Slave traders took even that from him. She nodded. They took many things. But not everything. Kaelin looked toward her. They couldn't take his kindness. The white wolf slowly lifted its head and rested it across Kaelin's boot. The king gently stroked its fur. Then quietly admitted something he hadn't told anyone. When I thought I'd lost him. His hand paused. I stopped believing I deserved to become close to anyone again. Elena looked toward the endless stars. Grief tells us many lies. He turned. And what's the biggest one? She smiled sadly. That loving again means betraying what we lost. The words settled gently between them. Kaelin stared at her for a long time. Not because he wanted to answer. Because he couldn't. She had somehow spoken directly to the wound he'd carried for years. Far away. Inside the council chamber. The mood was very different. Lord Varis slammed both hands onto the stone table. The king disappears into the western forest almost every week. Another elder nodded. Our spies followed him. And he visits a healer. Murmurs spread through the room. What healer? A woman living alone near the western woods. Lord Varis narrowed his eyes. And the rumors? The spy hesitated. There may also be. He chose his next words carefully. A white wolf. Silence consumed the chamber. Impossible. The royal wolf had died years ago. Everyone knew that. It hadn't. Lord Varis slowly stood. If that wolf truly lives. His eyes hardened. Then everything changes. Outside the tall council windows. A raven took flight into the darkening sky. Carrying with it the first whispers of a secret that would soon threaten not only Elena, but everyone she had come to love. The first snow arrived without warning. It covered the rooftops of Blackfong Fortress in a thin layer of white and softened the sharp edges of the ancient stone walls. The training grounds, usually filled with a clash of steel, seemed strangely peaceful beneath the quiet sky. Inside the castle, warmth replaced winter. Hundreds of candles flickered along endless corridors while servants hurried between kitchens and great halls, preparing for another long night inside the royal fortress. Yet there was one place where almost no one ever came. The old royal library. It rested beneath the western tower. Hidden behind enormous oak doors blackened by time. Dust-covered forgotten shelves. Scrolls slept untouched for decades. Ancient histories waited patiently for readers who had long since stopped searching. At evening, Elena followed the elderly royal healer down the winding staircase. He carried a small lantern. You'll like this place, she smiled. I already do. You haven't even seen it. I can smell old books. The old man laughed quietly. Then you're already halfway in love. The heavy doors creaked open. Thousands of books stretched from floor to ceiling. Maps drawn by forgotten kings. Journals written by ancient healers. Legends almost erased by time. The room itself felt alive. As though every page still remembered the hands that had once turned it. Elena wandered slowly between towering shelves. Her fingers brushed gently across faded leather bindings. She wasn't searching for treasure. She was searching for answers. The white wolf had healed far beyond what ordinary medicine should have allowed. The strange recognition between the wolf and Kaelin couldn't be explained. And the quiet feeling growing between herself and the Alpha King. It unsettled her in ways she couldn't understand. The old healer noticed her thoughtful expression. "Something troubles you." She hesitated. "Can grief change people?" He smiled gently. "It changes everyone. I mean..." She searched for the right words. "Can grief make someone forget who they're meant to become?" The old healer studied her for a moment. "Perhaps." He pointed toward a forgotten section near the back wall. "The oldest records about bond magic are there. I've never believed every legend." "You don't have to." He smiled. "Sometimes legends simply remember truths that history forgets." Hours passed quietly. Only the turning of pages disturbed the silence. Snow continued falling. Elena discovered stories unlike anything she had ever read. One ancient journal described wolves choosing their alphas before birth. Another spoke of healers capable of calming beasts no warrior could control. Most sounded like myths. Until she found one thin book hidden beneath several broken scrolls. Its cover had nearly faded away. Across the front, 3 silver wolves were embossed around a single moon. She carefully opened the fragile pages. The first sentence immediately caught her attention. "Not every mate recognizes the bond when fate first brings them together." Her heartbeat slowed. She continued reading. "Great sorrow can silence even the oldest bond." Another page. "When one soul survives unbearable grief, the moon may hide the bond until healing begins." Elena frowned. "Hide the bond," she whispered. Another paragraph explained further. "Some mates first meet not as lovers, but as healers. Trust awakens before destiny does." She stared at the words for several moments. Why did they feel so familiar? The little orphan wandered through another section of the library. The elderly healer smiled. "Careful. Some of those books are older than kingdoms." The boy nodded quietly. He had become more comfortable speaking during the past weeks, though long conversations still frightened him. He stopped before an enormous tapestry hanging across the far wall. Woven into its ancient fabric stood generations of Alpha Kings. Beside each ruler, a magnificent white wolf. Above them, the same royal crest Elena had discovered beneath the rescued wolf's collar. The child stared silently. Without hesitation. He pointed toward one forgotten symbol hidden near the bottom. "That means protector." The old healer blinked. "You can read Old Lunar." The boy frowned. "No." "Then how do you know?" He looked confused. "I don't." His small hand slowly touched another faded mark. "And that means..." He paused. "The healer walks beside the throne." The old man felt a chill crawl across his skin. Those translations were correct. Perfectly correct. Yet almost no one alive still understood the ancient language. "Who taught you?" The boy shook his head. "I don't remember." The old healer quietly looked toward Elena. Something about this child wasn't ordinary. Near midnight, heavy footsteps echoed through the library. Kaelin entered carrying several old records beneath one arm. He stopped upon seeing Elena sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by open books. A small smile appeared. "I should have known." She looked up. "My king, I've been looking for one military record." He glanced around her mountain of books. "I see you've chosen all the others." She laughed softly. "They were lonely. They've been waiting decades. I didn't want them to feel ignored." Kaelin shook his head with quiet amusement. "You make friends with books. They're easier than politicians." He couldn't argue with that. For the first time in weeks, he laughed. Not loudly. Just enough for the library walls to hear. The old healer looked up from across the room. He had known Kaelin since childhood. He couldn't remember the last time the king had laughed so naturally. Hours slipped by unnoticed. They worked quietly beside one another, sometimes sharing discoveries, sometimes reading in complete silence. The white wolf rested comfortably beside the fireplace, sleeping peacefully despite the enormous room. The orphan curled beneath a blanket with another old storybook, eventually falling asleep against one of the library shelves. Everything felt peaceful, like a family gathered together, though none of them would have dared say it aloud. Eventually, Elena found another passage. She looked toward Kaelin. "Can I ask you something?" "You already are." She smiled. "Do you believe destiny chooses people?" Kaelin leaned back thoughtfully. "I used to. And now, I believe choices matter more." She gently closed the book. What if destiny simply gives people the chance? And choice decides whether they keep it? Kaelin considered her words. "My wolf chose me." He looked toward the sleeping white wolf. "I didn't deserve that loyalty. You earned it. I failed him." "You believed you failed him," she corrected softly. "There's a difference." Kaelin remained silent. He had spent years punishing himself. Somehow, every conversation with Elena gently loosened another chain wrapped around his heart. A cold wind slipped beneath the library doors. Several loose pages scattered across the floor. Elena hurried to gather them before they disappeared beneath shelves. One ancient journal slid directly toward Kaelin. Both reached for it. Their hands touched, just briefly, barely a second, yet the moment the contact happened, everything around them seemed strangely quiet. Neither spoke. Neither pulled away immediately. A faint warmth spread through Elena's fingertips. Not painful. Not magical. Simply comforting. Kaelin felt it too. His heartbeat stumbled once, then steadied. The white wolf suddenly lifted its head. Its ears stood upright. It watched them silently. The old healer noticed. So did the orphan. Neither understood why the room suddenly felt different. Elena slowly withdrew her hand. "I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize." Neither mentioned what they had felt. Perhaps because neither could explain it. Outside the fortress, snow continued falling. Hidden among the trees beyond the castle walls, 3 cloaked riders watched the western tower. One lowered his hood. It was Lord Varis's most trusted spy. He quietly handed a rolled parchment to another rider. "The council was right. The healer is inside the castle again. And the king. He spends more time with her every week." The second rider narrowed his eyes. "What about the wolf? We haven't seen it clearly. But servants have." He hesitated. "They're saying." He looked toward the towering fortress. "The royal white wolf may have returned." Silence followed. If the rumor proved true, old succession laws could awaken. Hidden alliances would shift. Power would change hands. And one simple healer living quietly in the forest would suddenly become the most dangerous woman in the kingdom. As the riders disappeared into the snowy darkness, the candles inside the ancient library continued burning. Neither Elena nor Kaelin knew that every peaceful conversation, every shared silence, every quiet smile, was drawing the eyes of people who feared compassion far more than they feared war. And by the time winter ended, the forgotten bond sleeping quietly between them would no longer be a secret anyone could ignore. The first light of dawn never reached the council chamber. Its walls were built from black mountain stone, its narrow windows too small to welcome the morning. Massive pillars stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadow, and an enormous circular table stood at the center like a battlefield where swords had simply been replaced with words. This room had decided wars, chosen kings, condemned families, protected traditions that were older than memory itself. Today, it was preparing to decide the fate of one healer. Outside the chamber, Elena stood quietly beside the old royal healer. She wore the same simple forest green cloak she always had. No jewels, no silk, No royal symbols. Only worn leather boots still carrying traces of woodland mud. The orphan stood close beside her, holding her hand with surprising strength. He had barely spoken since arriving at the castle that morning. The white wolf rested at Elena's side. Its wounds had nearly healed, but it refused to leave her for even a moment. The elderly healer noticed her calm expression. "Are you afraid?" Elena looked toward the enormous wooden doors. "Yes." The old man seemed surprised by the honesty. "But fear doesn't always mean we should walk away." He smiled. "Your mother would be proud." Elena lowered her eyes. "I hope so." Is it? The council members were already waiting. Lord Varis sat nearest the throne. His silver robes reflected the candlelight, making him appear almost noble. But his cold eyes revealed something entirely different. Around him sat 12 elders representing the oldest families in the kingdom. Each carried centuries of tradition upon their shoulders. Each believed the law stood above emotion. Even when the law had forgotten mercy, General Rowan stood quietly beside the throne. His arms remained folded, his expression unreadable. The great doors opened. Kaelin entered. Every conversation stopped. Every elder stood. The Alpha King crossed the chamber with slow, measured steps before taking his place upon the ancient stone throne. His silver eyes swept across the room. "You requested this council." Lord Varis bowed respectfully. "We did, my king." "Then speak." Varis stepped forward. "The kingdom has heard troubling rumors." Kaelin remained silent. "The royal wolf has supposedly returned." "Oh." No answer. "A healer from the western forest has gained unusual influence over the throne." Silence. "And most concerning of all." Varis turned toward the chamber entrance. "The king has begun ignoring ancient law." The heavy doors opened once more. Elena entered quietly. The orphan followed. The white wolf walked calmly beside them. The moment the elders saw the wolf, several gasped. One elderly woman dropped the scroll she had been holding. Another whispered softly, "It can't be." The white fur, the scar above the left eye, the royal collar. There was no denying it. The king's bonded wolf still lived. Lord Varis recovered first. "So the rumors were true?" Kaelin answered calmly. "They were." Murmurs exploded around the chamber. An elder rose to his feet. "The wolf belongs to the crown." Another nodded. "It should be returned to the royal kennels immediately. It must be examined. It must be guarded. It must remain under council protection." The white wolf quietly stepped closer to Elena. Its body remained between her and the council. Kaelin noticed. So did everyone else. Lord Varis smiled thinly. "You see, the animal has become loyal to the healer." Another elder spoke sharply. "That alone proves she has manipulated it." General Rowan's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, Elena calmly spoke. "No." The room fell silent. "I healed him." She gently rested one hand on the wolf's neck. "I never asked him to choose me." Lord Varis slowly circled the chamber. "Perhaps. But there is another matter." He motioned toward the orphan. "Our investigation uncovered surviving slave traders." The little boy instinctively moved behind Elena. "They claim ownership." Silence. The words echoed through the chamber. Elena stared in disbelief. "Ownership?" Varis nodded. "According to the Southern Trade Accords." He unrolled an ancient parchment. Escaped property must be returned. The room became painfully quiet. The orphan's fingers trembled around Elena's cloak. She slowly looked toward Kaelin. He hadn't moved. His face revealed nothing. Only silence. Varis continued. "The law is clear. The child belongs to them." The little boy whispered so softly only Elena heard him. "I don't want to go back." She squeezed his hand. "You won't." One elder sighed heavily. "The law is unfortunate, but necessary." Another nodded. If we ignore it once, we weaken every law. Elena slowly stepped forward. She looked around the chamber. One face after another. People who spoke of justice, while preparing to return a child to chains. Finally, she spoke. When I found him, her voice remained calm. He wasn't called a child. No one asked his name. No one cared whether he had eaten. They called him property. She looked directly at the elders. Tell me. Her words became quieter. Which part of that deserves protection? No one answered. Lord Varis frowned. This is not about emotion. It's about order. Elena nodded slowly. Then perhaps your order is broken. Gasps spread through the room. Even General Rowan looked toward her with surprise. No one had ever spoken to the council so directly. Varis's voice hardened. Mind your tongue. I am. She answered gently. I wish more people had minded their hearts. The chamber doors suddenly opened once again. 2 royal guards entered carrying something wrapped in rough cloth. General Rowan frowned. What is this? One guard answered quietly. We found these near the burned slave wagon. He pulled away the cloth. Several rusted iron chains fell heavily onto the stone floor. The room echoed with metallic sound. Everyone recognized them. The same chains used to bind the prisoners. Elena slowly walked toward them. She knelt, carefully lifting one set into her hands. Cold, heavy, cruel. She looked toward the council. These, she whispered, once belonged to children. No one interrupted. She carried the chains to the center of the chamber, then gently laid them before the throne. The sound of iron striking stone echoed through every corner. If these laws protect chains. She looked toward the frightened orphan. More than children. Her eyes returned to the elders. Then perhaps the laws deserve to break. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the candles seemed motionless. Kaelan slowly rose from his throne. No one spoke. He descended the stone steps one by one. Each footstep echoed through the chamber. He stopped before the chains. For a long moment, he simply looked at them. He bent down, wrapped one hand around the rusted iron, and lifted them effortlessly. Lord Varis watched carefully. My king. Think carefully. The traditions of our ancestors. Kaelan interrupted quietly. My ancestors fought monsters. He looked toward the chains. They never intended to become them. With one powerful movement, he pulled. Iron groaned. Metal screamed. Crack. The chains shattered. Broken links scattered across the stone floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Several elders stood in stunned silence. Others lowered their heads. The orphan stared with wide eyes. The white wolf let out a deep, approving howl that rolled through the fortress. Kaelan dropped the broken chains at his feet. They will never bind another child. Lord Varis's face turned pale. You cannot simply destroy centuries of law. Kaelan slowly turned toward him. I just did. The king's voice remained calm, but it carried enough authority to silence the entire chamber. From this day forward, he continued, no child within my territory will ever be bought, sold, or claimed as property. He looked toward the royal scribes. Write it. The scribes immediately reached for their quills. Any trader violating this decree will lose every title, every possession, and every right to stand beneath my banner. The chamber remained frozen. History had just changed. Not through war, not through rebellion, but through one decision. Kaelan walked toward the orphan. The boy instinctively stepped back. The king knelt until they stood eye to eye. You are not property. The child blinked. You never were. His small lips trembled. No one, he whispered, has ever said that before. Kaelan gently placed one hand upon the boy's shoulder. They will never need to again. The child threw his arms around the Alpha King. The entire chamber watched in stunned silence. The most feared warrior in the kingdom quietly embraced one frightened child. No speeches, no ceremony, only compassion. But while hope filled the council chamber, Lord Varis quietly watched from the shadows. His expression never changed. Inside his sleeve, his fingers tightened around a sealed letter. A letter already sent days earlier. One carrying a single order to enemies beyond the kingdom's borders. If the council cannot remove the healer, someone else will. Far away, hidden beneath the darkness of the western forest, hooded riders had already begun moving toward Elena's cottage. And none of them intended to leave witnesses behind. The kingdom celebrated. For the first time in generations, people filled the streets with smiles instead of whispers. Mothers held their children a little tighter. Merchants spoke openly about the king's new decree. Even the oldest villagers admitted they had never imagined seeing the day when slavery would disappear from Blackfang territory. Hope spread quickly. But hope had a habit of frightening people who had built their lives on fear. Far beyond the castle walls, someone was preparing to silence it forever. The sun dipped behind the mountains, bathing the western forest in deep shades of gold and crimson. Elena had finally returned home. The little cottage looked exactly as she had left it. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. Wildflowers swayed gently outside the fence. The stream nearby murmured softly over smooth stones. For anyone passing by, it looked like the safest place in the kingdom. The orphan stood beside the vegetable garden, carefully watering tiny seedlings. The white wolf rested beneath the old oak tree, its thick white coat glowing softly beneath the evening light. Its wounds had healed. Only the scar above its eye remained, a reminder of everything it had survived. Elena smiled. "You've become stronger." The wolf lifted its head. Its silver-blue eyes met hers. Instead of answering with a growl, it slowly walked toward her and gently leaned against her shoulder. She laughed quietly. "I'll take that as a yes." The orphan smiled from across the garden. "I think he likes hugs." "I think you're right." For a few precious moments, life felt wonderfully ordinary. Blackfang Fortress remained restless. General Rowan entered the king's study carrying several sealed reports. Kaelin looked up immediately. "What happened?" 3 council spies disappeared. Kaelin frowned. Disappeared. They never returned after leaving the western border. Another report followed. 2 patrols discovered strange horse tracks. Bandits. Rowan slowly shook his head. "No. They moved like soldiers." Kaelin stood immediately. "Where?" "The western forest." His heartbeat quickened. "Elena." Without another word, he reached for his sword. Night arrived quickly. A cold wind swept through the trees surrounding Elena's cottage. The birds stopped singing. Even the insects grew strangely quiet. The white wolf suddenly stood. Its ears pointed toward the darkness. Every muscle in its body tightened. The orphan noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" The wolf released a low growl. Not loud. Not angry. Warning. Elena slowly placed her basket on the table. She had learned to trust that sound. Something was coming. Beyond the trees, 5 hooded riders silently dismounted. Each carried crossbows coated with silver. Each wore dark clothing without family crests. Mercenaries. Professionals. One of them quietly unfolded a parchment. A rough drawing of Elena's face. "The healer first." Another nodded. "And the child?" "No witnesses." The leader looked toward the cottage. "What about the wolf?" His answer was cold. "Kill it." Inside the cottage, the white wolf suddenly barked. Just once. Urgent. Elena immediately understood. Inside. She looked at the orphan. "Go to the cellar." "But now." The boy obeyed without another question. Years of fear had taught him to recognize danger. He disappeared beneath the hidden trapdoor just as another sound echoed outside. Footstep. Then another. Then silence. A voice came from beyond the door. "Is anyone home?" Elena didn't answer. The voice sounded polite. Too polite. The wolf stood directly in front of her. Its lips slowly pulled back, revealing sharp white teeth. Another knock. Louder this time. "We're travelers. We need help." Elena quietly reached beneath the table. Her hand closed around the old hunting knife she rarely used. She looked toward the wolf. "Don't leave him." The wolf didn't move. The mercenary leader smiled. "She knows." Another man raised his crossbow. "Then we stop asking." The bolt exploded through the front window. Glass shattered across the room. Elena threw herself sideways. The arrow buried itself deep into the wall exactly where her head had been. The attack had begun. The cottage door burst inward. 3 armed men rushed inside. The first never reached Elena. The white wolf hit him like a storm. Its enormous body slammed into the attacker, throwing him across the room before either understood what had happened. The second mercenary swung his sword. The wolf twisted away with surprising speed. The blade struck only empty air. Elena grabbed a burning log from the fireplace and swung it toward another attacker. Flames exploded across his cloak. He stumbled backward screaming. 2 more assassins circled toward the rear entrance. Everything happened within seconds. Far away, Kalen rode through the forest like thunder. Branches whipped against his cloak as his horse charged between ancient pines. General Rowan and 12 royal guards followed close behind. None of them spoke. They all heard it. A wolf's howl. Long, powerful, filled with warning. Kalen's face turned pale. Faster. Inside the cottage, another assassin reached the cellar door. He lifted his sword. The orphan looked up from below with terrified eyes. Before the blade could fall, the white wolf leaped. It crashed into the attacker with enough force to send both of them through the wooden wall. Splintered timber exploded everywhere. The wolf landed hard. The assassin rolled across the ground. Another mercenary immediately raised his silver crossbow. He aimed directly at Elena. Everything slowed. She saw the bolt. She couldn't move. The white wolf ran. Not away. Toward her. The silver bolt flew. The wolf threw itself between Elena and the arrow. The projectile struck deep into its shoulder. The impact spun the great animal sideways. Crashed heavily onto the ground. "No!" Elena's scream echoed across the forest. For one horrifying heartbeat, everything became silent. That exact moment, Kalen arrived. His horse burst through the trees. The Alpha King saw only one thing. The white wolf, lying motionless before Elena. The same image. The same fear. The same nightmare that had haunted him for years. Something inside him broke. He jumped from his horse before it fully stopped. The ground cracked beneath his landing. His silver eyes burned with fury. "You!" His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Hurt. My family." The assassins hesitated. They had expected a king, not a force of nature. Kalen moved. One attacker barely lifted his sword before the Alpha struck it aside. Another tried to flee. General Rowan intercepted him with a crushing blow. Within moments, the royal guards surrounded the remaining mercenaries. The battle ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Kalen dropped beside the white wolf. Blood stained the animal's white fur. His hands trembled exactly as they had years before. "No!" His voice cracked. "Not again." Elena immediately knelt beside him. "Listen to me." She gently touched the wound. It missed the heart. Kalen looked at her desperately. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "Help him." "I will." She carefully removed the silver bolt. The wolf whimpered softly. It was alive. Relief washed across Kalen's face so suddenly that tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. He looked down at the wolf. "You stubborn old friend." The wolf slowly opened one eye. Despite the pain, It gently nudged Kaelin's hand. Exactly as it always had. Kaelin laughed through his tears. So you're still protecting everyone. Only then did he notice Elena's hands. They were bleeding. A long cut stretched across her forearm where broken glass had sliced through her skin. He immediately reached for her. You're hurt. It's only a scratch. He gently took her hand anyway. The moment their skin touched, a strange warmth spread through both of them. Neither expected it. Neither understood it. Soft silver light slowly appeared beneath their wrists. First, barely visible, then brighter. Ancient markings emerged beneath their skin like moonlight flowing through water. Intertwined vines. A crescent moon. The outline of two wolves facing one another. Elena stared in disbelief. What? Kaelin couldn't speak. The white wolf slowly lifted its head. It looked at the glowing marks. Then quietly rested its chin across both of their joined hands. As though it had been waiting for this moment all along. General Rowan stepped forward. His eyes widened. My king, he whispered. The moon bond. Silence filled the forest. Kaelin looked at Elena. She looked back at him. No dramatic confession. No sudden embrace. Only quiet understanding. Everything that had drawn them together. Every conversation. Every shared silence. Every gentle act of kindness. Had never been an accident. Their hearts had simply found each other long before their souls remembered. Dawn arrived with gentle golden light filtering through the trees. Royal guards searched the captured mercenaries. General Rowan opened one leather satchel taken from their leader. Inside lay sealed letters, payment records, and one old document bearing an unfamiliar royal seal. The elderly royal healer carefully unfolded it. His hands began to shake. He looked toward the orphan. My king. What is it? This child. He swallowed hard. Is the grandson of the former royal high healer. Everyone stared at the little boy. The healer continued reading. His family disappeared during the slave raids 12 years ago. Kaelin slowly knelt before the child. So you were never forgotten. The boy's eyes filled with tears. I have a family. Kaelin smiled gently. You always did. The little boy looked toward Elena first, then toward Kaelin. Finley. He wrapped his arms around both of them at once. The white wolf rested beside them. The rising sun warmed the quiet forest. For the first time, none of them felt alone. Yet hidden among the captured letters, one final message remained unread. A message carrying Lord Varis's personal seal. Proof that the conspiracy reached far deeper than anyone had imagined. And before peace could truly return, the kingdom would have to face one final truth. Not every enemy waited beyond the borders. Had been sitting beside the throne all along. Spring came quietly. No royal announcement welcomed it. No festival declared its arrival. The snow simply melted. Tiny streams returned to the forest. Wildflowers pushed gently through the thawing earth. Birdsong replaced the long silence of winter. The kingdom itself seemed to breathe differently. Lighter. Freer. As though even the land had been waiting for the darkness to pass. Yet one final chapter still remained unwritten. Blackfang Fortress had changed. Not in appearance. Its towering walls still reached toward the sky. Its banners still danced proudly in the mountain wind. Its warriors still trained every morning beneath the watchful eyes of their commanders. But something inside those ancient walls felt different. The servants smiled more often. The soldiers laughed without looking over their shoulders. Children from nearby villages now played inside the castle gardens without fear. The decree abolishing slavery had spread beyond the kingdom's borders. Some neighboring rulers mocked Kaelin. Others quietly copied him. Change had begun. And once hope learned to walk, it rarely chose to crawl again. Inside the great hall, the council gathered one final time. This meeting felt unlike any before it. No one argued. No one raised their voice. At the center of the chamber stood Lord Varis. His proud posture had disappeared. The sealed letters recovered from the assassins rested upon the stone table. Every piece of evidence pointed toward him. Payments, orders, his personal seal, his betrayal. Kalen stood before the throne. His voice remained calm. You ordered innocent people to die. Varis looked around desperately. They made you weak. They made you forget tradition. They threatened everything this kingdom was built upon. Kalen slowly descended the throne steps. No, he stopped only a few feet away. They reminded me what this kingdom was supposed to become. Varis clenched his fists. You would choose one healer over centuries of law? Kalen shook his head. I chose justice. The chamber fell silent. General Rowan stepped forward. The council has reached its verdict. Varis closed his eyes. He already knew. For crimes against the crown. For conspiracy. And for ordering the murder of innocent citizens. You are stripped of every title. Every land. Every privilege. He would spend the remainder of his life imprisoned within the northern fortress. Not executed. Not celebrated. Simply forgotten. As the guards led him away, he looked back one final time. He expected satisfaction upon Kalen's face. He found only sadness. Not for himself, but for a man who had mistaken power for purpose. Several days later, the kingdom celebrated once more. This time not because an enemy had fallen, but because peace had finally returned. The castle courtyard filled with musicians. Children chased one another between blooming gardens. The orphan, who had finally remembered his name was Luca after seeing it written in his grandfather's old journal, laughed louder than anyone. His cheeks had filled with healthy color. The fear in his eyes had disappeared. The elderly royal healer officially welcomed him into the castle infirmary as an apprentice. You'll make mistakes. The old man smiled. So did I. Luca grinned. So did Elena. Elena laughed from across the room. I still do. Kalen watched them quietly. His heart felt strangely full. He realized something. He had spent years protecting the kingdom, yet he had forgotten how much joy there was in simply watching people live. The white wolf had healed completely. Its coat shone brighter than fresh snow beneath the spring sunlight. No longer limped. Its strength had fully returned. Every morning it wandered freely between the castle and Elena's cottage, refusing to belong entirely to either place. Some said it guarded the kingdom. Others believed it watched over its future queen. The wolf never confirmed either rumor. It simply remained where it was needed most. One quiet afternoon, Kalen asked Elena to walk with him. No guards followed. No servants interrupted. Only the white wolf padded silently a few steps behind them. They followed an old forest path neither had walked together before. Eventually, the trees opened. Elena immediately recognized the place. The memorial hill. The same lonely clearing where she had once hidden among the shadows. The same place where she had witnessed the strongest man in the kingdom quietly breaking beneath the weight of grief. Only now, everything had changed. The old weathered marker remained. The wooden post still stood proudly, but around it, hundreds of white moon lilies bloomed. Their delicate petals swayed gently in the spring breeze. The lonely hill had become a garden. Kalen smiled softly. I planted them. Elena looked around in quiet wonder. All of these. Not alone. He glanced toward the white wolf. I had help. The wolf almost seemed to smile. They stood together in comfortable silence. No words felt necessary. The wind carried the scent of flowers through the clearing. Birds nested among the nearby branches. Far below, the kingdom stretched peacefully toward the horizon. Finally, Kalen walked to the old wooden post. The worn leather collar still hung there. He reached up slowly, carefully lifting it into his hands. For years, He had carried that collar like a promise he could never fulfill. A reminder of failure. A reminder of loss. A reminder that love always ended in goodbye. He looked toward the white wolf. The great animal stood proudly in the sunlight. Alive. Healthy. Kaelin smiled through misty eyes. I don't need this anymore. Very gently. He placed the old collar beneath the blooming flowers instead of returning it to the post. Not because he wished to forget, but because he no longer needed grief to remember love. Elena watched quietly. She understood. Some people buried pain. Others carried it forever. Kaelin had finally learned something different. He could honor the past, without living inside it. After a long silence, he turned toward her. There is something I should have said long ago. Elena smiled gently. I'm listening. He searched for the right words. The Alpha King who could command armies, who could silence council chambers, who could face entire battlefields without fear, suddenly struggled to speak. I spent years believing strength meant never letting anyone see me break. His voice remained soft. The night you found me here. He looked around the memorial. You could have destroyed everything. You could have told the kingdom. You could have used my grief against me. He met her eyes. You protected it instead. Elena smiled. It wasn't mine to share. Kaelin nodded slowly. That was the moment everything began changing. She looked surprised. Before I knew your name. Before I understood the bond. You reminded me that being seen. He paused. Didn't always mean being judged. The spring breeze gently stirred Elena's dark hair. She stepped a little closer. I didn't heal you. No. Kaelin answered quietly. You stayed. Another long silence settled between them. Neither hurried to fill it. Because some truths deserved room to breathe. The silver markings upon their wrists slowly appeared once more. Not bright. Not overwhelming. Just a soft glow beneath their skin. The ancient moon bond no longer demanded recognition. Simply waited. Patiently. Like it always had. Kaelin carefully reached for Elena's hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined naturally. The marks shimmered gently. The white wolf lifted its head toward the sky. A long, peaceful howl echoed across the valley. Not a cry of warning. Not a call to battle. The sound rolled across forests, across rivers, across villages, as though the kingdom itself wished to answer. Far away, other wolves replied, one after another, until the mountains seemed alive with voices welcoming something ancient home. Kaelin looked into Elena's eyes. There was no fear, no uncertainty, only truth. I don't know what tomorrow brings. He admitted, there will always be another problem. Another difficult choice. Another storm. He smiled faintly. But his thumb gently brushed across her hand. I'd like to face them with you. Elena's eyes filled with quiet tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears that came when a heart finally stopped carrying its burdens alone. She laughed softly. I was beginning to wonder how long it would take you. Kaelin blinked. You knew. She smiled. I knew you were stubborn. The Alpha King laughed. Real laugh. Free. Unburdened. The kind of laughter that belonged to the young man he had once been before grief had stolen so many years. I suppose I was. You still are. Probably. She stepped closer. I can live with that. Their foreheads gently touched. Not out of passion, but trust. The silver markings across their wrists finally settled into their complete shape. Two wolves beneath a single moon. The bond had awakened, not because fate demanded it, but because they had earned it. One quiet act of kindness. One shared silence. One healed wound at a time. Below the hill, Luca laughed as he chased butterflies across the meadow. The elderly healer shook his head. You'll never catch them. I don't have to. The boy smiled. I just like watching them fly. General Rowan stood nearby with folded arms. He glanced toward the hill where Kaelin and Elena stood together. It took him long enough. The old healer chuckled. He is an alpha. They're all stubborn. The white wolf trotted happily toward Luca, allowing the laughing boy to wrap both arms around its neck. Neither seemed broken anymore. Both had found a place where they belonged. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the mountains, the kingdom settled into peaceful evening. No chains remained. No slave wagons crossed the roads. No lonely king cried beneath the moon in secret. There was a healer who had chosen compassion over fear. A king who had learned that tears did not weaken a man. A child who had found his name again. And a loyal white wolf that had refused to let hope die. Sometimes, the greatest love stories were never about destiny arriving like lightning. Sometimes, they were built from quiet choices. From protecting another person's pain. From staying when leaving would have been easier. And from believing that even hearts broken by grief could become home again